We are pleased today to have Kyle Cherek, host of Wisconsin Foodie, present to us. Kyle is host of the Emmy Award-winning television show Wisconsin Foodie, currently in his 9th season on PBS and broadcast primetime to millions of households. As a culinary historian, food enthusiast, and storyteller, Kyle explores where our food comes from and how it shapes who we are. Kyle has appeared as food judge on the Travel Channel, a commentator pundit on the Cooking Channel, and is a regular media contributor and essayist on NPR. His 2016 presented a TED Talks called We Eat What We Are, about the powerful science and emotion behind food memories. In an effort to raise people's consciousness about their food choices, he frequently hosts cooking demonstrations and is a regular presenter and panelist on issues of food, sustainability, and culinary trends. Please join me in welcoming Kyle.
And I put my pants on one leg at a time like everybody else. Thanks for the great intro. I don't really do anything but for what these folks do day to day and then really just tell the stories of that. But terrific intro, and thank you, New Glarus, for supporting this conference. I'm just going to go down the line. So to my right is my friend Zach Baker, who is the executive chef and what's your managing partner for Pizza Man, which has now 3 restaurants in the southeastern Wisconsin area, and more to come, I'm sure. I don't think we're telling any secrets, but eventually that's going to happen. You're kind of on a tear. To his right is someone related to him, his brother Drew, who is the managing partner and farmer of Love Rock Farm, along with his wife Jamie, and brought both of them in together today because Pizza Man gets a great deal of their ingredients from Love Rock Farm, not just because they're related, but because the ingredients are terrific and they work in concert with the volume that Pizza Man needs. To Drew's right is Dan Schneider of Maxie's, Blues Egg, and
Story Hill.
Story Hill, BKC, thank you. Otherwise known as Black Shoe Hospitality. And you are the founder, one of the co-founders, and...
There's 2 partners in the business, myself and Joe Mensch.
Yeah.
And all 3 of our restaurants are located right in kind of the city center of Milwaukee, between 50th and 76th, and clustered around Blue Mountain Road.
So all of these gentlemen work in the realm of farm to table, but they do so in a way that's profitable, that works from scale, and works with the volume that their restaurants have. Just as a reference point, how many eggs, and Joe might know this better, but how many eggs do you go through on a typical brunch Saturday, Sunday cycle?
Well, on a weekly basis between, Maxie's, our egg usage isn't that high, but Story Hill's become a very busy brunch spot too. Between the 2, we're buying about between 8,500 and 9,000 eggs a week. And that actually can go up to as much as, like during Christmas week, 10,000 eggs, somewhere in the neighborhood.
And what would be something comparable that you go through of an ingredient at Pizza Man?
It wouldn't be eggs or vegetables in that case, but mozzarella cheese, which we made it a point to only buy mozzarella cheese from Wisconsin. It actually comes from Chilton, Wisconsin, from Foremost. And between the 3 restaurants, over the course of a month, we'll use around 15 to 20,000 pounds.
So they're doing it in real time. The USDA and the Center for Sustainable Agriculture did a co-study in 2009, essentially codifying and proving that when you buy local, and they defined it by within 150 miles of your restaurant, 70 to 76 cents of that dollar is then kept in that 150-mile radius as far as economic impact. So there's a real reason, if you like the people that you live near, and you like where you live, to do that. And then I would argue rather to petro shipping and dollars and ecological waste, there's a real reason to buy local as well. I've hosted conferences like this, or symposiums like this, at this conference in the past, and I think everyone is on board that we should buy local. That's just a great thing. If we have a lemonade stand in our neighborhood, we go there, even if the lemonade stand is so-so.
Wisconsin lemons.
Yeah, right, exactly, Wisconsin lemons. But the feedback was, that's wonderful, but how do we do it and feature something that isn't just a special? Because there's only 2 tenderloins on a cow, there's only so many strawberries you can get from the farmer that pulls up in his or her wagon, you get the gist. I brought all these gentlemen, and I'm going to foster this conversation, but get out of their way because they do it real time on scale. And I don't know Drew as well, but I know both of you, and I know you like to make money. You don't have to be the richest guy on the block, but you're in this because it's the restaurant business. So if you want to talk about maybe first with your first restaurant, how you took that dimension and then used it as you grew, and then I'd love to hear how you use it in Pizza Man, where you've got pretty much of a specific product that people have. Aside from donuts and hamburgers, I can't think of any other American
It's the world's
food.
favorite food.
Yeah, and French fries, but everyone knows what the best one tastes like as well. So you can't get all chef creative.
No.
I mean, you can, but you can't. There's a certain realm.
Well, there's an expectation that comes along
Right.
with, it's supposed
Right.
to taste like this.
And
right?
it should cost about here.
Yes.
So a $40 pizza with great local ingredients is one that really will only be photographed.
That's totally true.
Yeah. So Dan, go ahead and.
Sure. I think what we're doing now is different than what we did when we opened Maxie's. It'll be 10 years ago in May. But what we've found over the course of those 10 years, and my experience with this actually goes back all the way, I went to college in Ithaca, New York, and they had a really great farmer's market. And my boss, I worked for a horrible Frenchman who would make me get up every Saturday morning at 6 a.m. and go down and go schlep his produce for him. But what we experienced there was, even then, and then my time in Colorado and then being here, was always about, if you're going to embrace the idea of buying direct from farms, you need to understand that you can't just buy one thing. You need to look at it in terms of a partnership with this farmer. And the farmer needs to understand they've got to be bringing you things that you really can utilize and sell in a timely manner. It's got to make it easy. I've had farmers who say, if I want to drive out to the farm and pick up product from them, they'd be happy to sell it to me. I'm not going to drive 30 miles out into the country to pick up product. If she wants to sell to us, they've got to bring it to us. So there's a commitment that means sometimes you've got to buy things that maybe you don't have an obvious and immediate use for. You got to figure out what to do with it. And sometimes you have to take quantities perhaps that are larger than what you would like to make it viable for the farmer. But again, it's a give and take, and that the farmer's got to be able to come back and work with you. That's one way. And then as we have grown and our restaurants have gotten busier, we've realized that if we really want to embrace it in a significant way, we have to work on a more of a regional type approach as opposed to us and a farmer. We work, between the three restaurants, we work with about 12 or 13 different farmers directly, and then we also have relationships with different companies that are, sometimes fostered by people like Nesvig, or Maki Produce, or some other people who will be the go-betweens and help us make these connections. Because as much as I want to embrace the local pig farmer, on a Saturday night at Maxie's, I'm going to sell 40 orders of ribs, 60 orders of ribs. I can't buy 40 or 60 cows or 20 cows. I've got to work with somebody who can supply a large number of sustainably raised, and I fairly specific to say sustainable because we buy organic when we can, but more often than not, what we're buying are sustainably raised, ethically raised products, and we try very hard to investigate and make sure that's a legitimate thing. It's not just that somebody told us it was that. But to stick strictly with organic products, I don't think we could embrace it nearly to the level that we do. Price prohibitive, availability prohibitive, all of those things. And then we do have relationships where, like, we've got people that we buy whole lamb from, and we'll bring them in and we'll butcher them and we'll use them in a variety of different ways. So there's not a one size fits all here. To really accomplish it, you got to consider lots of different possibilities. One of the things that we're just starting to look into, that we're trying to figure out, is how to do more preserving, pickling, canning, all the things that would allow us to embrace when things are fully in season and use them more. We haven't really done it yet, but we're scaling up. So again, I think it's a process, and there's going to be different ways to accomplish things at different times a year.
So how do you meet it with the challenges, and then what are the conversations that you have with your brother and his wife where it's your relations, but it's, business, and you need to say, I need this much, in essence, at this price, or it won't work for, that's a special. I can sell 22 of those. I've got 1,200 pizzas, though, that I need to sell.
Well, I kind of echoing what Joe said. I think one of the first things you need to do is you need to have some flexibility in what you're doing. That allows you to use kind of like a lot of the little one-off things like, we have 10 pounds of black radishes right now. It's like, okay, I'll take those. Where are we going to use them? I don't know. I'll find a spot for them. But what's nice about having a farmer in the family, and the thing people don't know about Drew is that Drew actually spent a lot of time working in restaurants. So being a chef in the Bartolotta group, one of the things that I encountered, after I moved to Milwaukee in the early 2000s, or the aughts, if you like to call it that, what was that there were farmers trying to sell the restaurants, and there were restaurants that were trying to use it, but they weren't speaking the same language. There wasn't a good interface. Like the farmers wanted me to place an order on Tuesday to come the following Saturday, when I'm like, I have no, I don't know when I'm going to need them. And in their mind, they're like, well, this costs us money to leave our farms and truck this stuff around. Like we need to know what we're going to do then. So there were kind of this incompatibility at first that took a little while to shake out. When you have a relationship directly with somebody like Drew, and then we have a really good relationship with the people who mentored Drew into farming as well. A lot of what's going to happen this growing season, we start talking about in December, in January, in February, and I'll pull reports out of Pizza Man. I have a way that I can kind of track, essentially. I can tell you exactly how many pounds of romaine I went through last year through Pizza Man. Like
How many?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. But
You can't just put that out there, dude.
you're right, I should have looked at it. It's a lot. It's a lot. I would, if I had to guess, it's probably about 75 pounds a week per restaurant. There's 3 restaurants times 52, if anybody has a calculator.
There you go.
So we have conversations about, what am I looking for? What do I need? And the main thing I know is that if I'm going to have them bringing me, 5 pounds of this, 10 pounds of this, I need to have other things that I can be like, I need 60 pounds of this, I need 100 pounds of this. But honestly, the conversation a lot of times isn't, what do I need? It's how much do you have? Because kind of like Joe's saying, there's times you need to buy sometimes a little bit more than what you technically want, or you think you can use to kind of help the farmer out and to make that trip away from their farm worth their time. I mean, Drew's coming from the Monticello New Glarus area. Stephen DeBergeur coming down from Belgium. So it has to be worth their time to come down and spend a day carting stuff around Milwaukee. So the first thing we do with people like Love Rock Farm is we try to home in on a couple things that I know I'm going to blaze quantities of, especially when they're in season. Things like eggplant. Pizza Man can go through 125 pounds of eggplant a week, just making eggplant fries and eggplant parmesan.
I'm good for like 2 of those pounds
Yeah,
of
exactly.
fries. Yeah.
Things like romaine, things like butter lettuce, these things that are relatively easy for them to grow, that they can grow large quantities of. They're not as labor intensive as other things. Essentially, you kind of take the model of like a commodity market, like a cash crop, where you have farmers basically just growing soybeans, and that's the only thing they sell, and they sell all of them to one big person, they get their money, they walk. Taking that idea and using that to kind of buttress up this business you can do with these people, so when they're showing up, you're not buying $85 worth of something, you're buying $500 or $600 worth of something every week. And then on top of that, the flexibility of writing a menu that you're purposely vague. If you look at the Pizza Man menu, and I honestly, I get complaints from servers sometimes because they're like, people are really mad that there's onion in the salad and it doesn't say it, because we have a salad that just says lettuces and vegetables. And they're like, why don't you just tell them what it is? I said, because I don't know what I'm going to have. And if I say I'm going to have Swiss chard on a dish, and then the Swiss chard after 3 weeks runs its course and we're waiting for another
anything
batch or whatever you call them in farming to come up in another month and a half, it's like, okay, now we have lacinato kale, or now we have dandelion greens or chicory. I need to have the ability to kind of adapt and move along with those things, because you're right, it's not just specials. I think everybody thinks of farmer produce, it's like, I can make a special, I'll braise those radishes and serve it, with a pork chop from a local farmer. But the amount of stuff you can buy and go through at that point is very limited, and it makes the business difficult for them. And I'm a guilty person, so when they call me and they tell me what they have, like, I feel bad if I can't take it all. So I will work tirelessly with myself and my chefs to try to be creative and come up with an idea. I've always enjoyed the idea of creative limitations, where it's not like, what do you want to do? Oh, I can do whatever I want. You know, I enjoy saying, this is what we have, and then come up with an idea with it. I think that's kind of a fun way to work. It's a fun way to train people to think about working, and I think it kind of makes the restaurant a little bit more dynamic in terms of what the customer gets on their plate at the end.
Drew, what's that like from the farmer experience? Because you have to grow this stuff, and you have a different relationship here. You don't have to wonder, will someone buy this? But you still, maybe you'd like to do X amount of acreage for this, because it's less work.
Yeah, it is, you know, trying to find that balance between them, because, you know, it is incredibly easy to grow rows and rows of lettuce, you know, but, you know, they're inexpensive, you know, but we're all in the interest of being diverse, right? And so you can do a few of these specialty things, you know, that they maybe would ask for in those off season, but also with the understanding that, you know, things like having, you know, green and colored beans on the menu, you know, knowing that I, for 6 weeks in the harvest season, have a captive market for beans that I can sell at a lower price, knowing that I'm going to be able to keep on putting them out, kind of helps ease the burden of that. But it's because, you know, it's not just the model of farming that you want. You know, it has to be sustainable. You don't want a monocrop. It's nice to focus on these few things, but, you know, that helps both of us out. I can produce them at a more competitive price, and he's always going to use them.
Dan, talk a little bit about the growth of Yuppie Hill, because I look at you folks as the reinsurance company for her for her growth.
Actually, it's not Yuppie Hill. J&R Acres.
J&R Acres, excuse me, that's right.
We've certainly done some work with them, but J&R Acres is our primary egg purveyor. And I mean,
I confuse you in, forgive me, but Collectivo buys a lot of Yuppie Hill.
They do.
Yeah, they're two big egg players.
But it's one of those really kind of great success stories, in that when we were first getting Blues up and running, not quite 6 years ago, we knew we were going to be very egg intensive, and we knew that we wanted a very high quality product, and we were, even Yuppie Hill was a great product, but they were really not able to supply us the quantities we were hoping for.
And this spot it's solely lunch and brunch, for those of you that haven't been to Blues. First of all, I'm sorry. And second of all, it's solely lunch and brunch, so you can imagine eggs are,
We're all about eggs. But in the conversation at the time, Randy from J&R Acres was still driving a truck and was not able to do what he wanted to do full-time. I know his wife was still working at another job. They had started a farm, they were raising chickens, but we made a commitment to them and said we will buy, at that time I think it was 3,000 eggs a week, and now has grown. But that commitment, which we put in writing, allowed them to go and speak to the bank and get financing to buy, build and grow their farm, and it helped them get up and running, and it's been a great relationship ever since. And so that, the hope is that more and more of those kinds of relationships can be done. Obviously, there's some limitations to them, but it's an environment where a commitment, again. We're in business, we need to make a profit, but just like you make a big financial leap of faith to open a restaurant in the first place, you need to make that same leap of faith that you're going to make it happen. And I think something that is assumed, but we haven't necessarily talked about today and is often not talked about, is justifying the price. Because for the farmers, the people we want to work with, they're doing things sustainably, they're working on a smaller scale, they need to be able to get a higher price, per item, whatever that item may be, and we understand that, and we appreciate we could buy something cheaper from a large scale operation, but we want to support the smaller farmer, the better quality, and at the end of the day, quality will always trump local. It has to. We're in the business of producing great food, the best food we possibly can, and the fact that it comes from down the road is great, but it's got to be a great quality product. So if it's a quality product, the farmer can justify the sale price to us, we have a better time justifying to the guests. But to talk a little bit about what Zach was inferring, where sometimes you have to be intentionally vague, what we do then, and what we try very hard to do then, is to educate our service staff to tell the story. We need to be able to speak tableside about specifically what we have today, the fact that it arrived today, and that it is a great quality product, and it may not be around again. I remember we created a couple specials around ramps last year that people were just going nuts for.
Ramps.
They love them. Yep. And when they're gone, they come in and like, well, where's the ramp dish? I'm like, ramps are out of season now. And there's a lot of people hip to that, but
In your
there's
memory.
a larger portion of people who have no idea. Like, well, what do you mean? So I can get oranges
Yeah, the
any
idea
time
that
of
that
year.
isn't available right then and there is a far out.
It was a thing. All of a sudden, people were giving us grief on Yelp because we ran out of ramps. I'm just like, it is what it is. So
two leitmotifs that I'm picking up on. One, first of all, in your quality trumps local. Thomas Keller said that in like 2003, and everybody went,
I wasn't the first?
It trickled through, yeah. Well, and he didn't, it wasn't an interview about that. He was doing a pop-up in London, and a famous food writer was, Sitwell, was interviewing him, and he basically said, he almost exactly said, I don't have an obligation to buy local. I have an obligation to buy the best product I can get my hands on. And I don't care if it's snails from France or cheese from, it doesn't matter. That's my obligation as a chef, which I think a lot of people are not aware of when they think about buying local. You should always do that first. The other thing that I'm picking up on is that you've got to have a really capable to great chef to work with all these things. Joe is a terrific chef. You're a terrific chef. Not everybody can look at 10 pounds of radishes and what have you and have
4 different ways to use them.
Yeah, right, and have a myriad.
Before they go bad.
Yeah, have a myriad of ideas. So if you're in restaurants and you have a cook, which is great, or a chef who doesn't have as much imagination, moving in this direction may or may not be the way to go initially, because you need to have that capability. Yeah.
Well, and if you're in a situation like that, I think one of the things you need to understand is that, you you used the term greenwashing yesterday, how now everybody's farm to table. And honestly, like, I've always hesitated to label Pizza Man a farm to table restaurant. I probably go through more local products than a lot of other restaurants that are farm to table, but we're not 100%. We've never claimed to be. So I have an insecurity about trying to push that too hard because I know it's not 100% true. If you're going to start doing this, though, if you tell yourself you have to go 100% in, you're going to put yourself behind the 8 ball, and you're going to struggle greatly with that. And then to fail at that, what have you accomplished? I always talk about look, you're going to win the battle, but you're going to lose the war. Great, good for you. You bought all local produce last week, but if your restaurant closes in 6 months, now you're not supporting that farmer any longer. And I think it's important to identify the key things that you can do initially, and then talk to your farmers and say, what do you have too much of? What can you get me? And then start there, and then slowly start to put more and more of it in. There's restaurants in Madison that I think function mostly off only farmer produce, and it kind of fascinates me to a degree because they're just going to serve root vegetables all winter. Running a Pizza Man, can I legitimately look at a customer in February and be like, we don't have any tomato sauce for our pizza right now?
Right.
I've got butternut squash sauce. That's awesome.
So now we're a pizza restaurant. Tomatoes probably the extreme example of what I really can't just say no. But people will be like, what happened to that asparagus appetizer you ran with the fried egg on it? I'm like, well, we only do that when it's asparagus season. Or people call for the ramp pizza that we would run, and they would want it in February. It's like, no, we don't have that right now. People would actually email me, and I would make it a point to put like a little flag reminder on it, and then email them in late May and be like, hey, just so you know, the ramps are coming in next week. My guy from Door County called me. He's going out foraging this week. I should have 50 pounds by this time next week.
So that's something that I have not seen enough done by restaurants, and I've shared this with so many people in the industry and with my business partner. And when you get ramps in, when you get asparagus in, when you get whatever people loved, use social media, put a freaking sandwich board guy on the corner, whatever it is you do, but it's clear that people will come to your restaurant even if it's a banner week for that thing.
Sure.
Totally.
I mean, it's such a competitive business, and I see so few restaurants saying we have such and such in season right now. Come in, it'll be gone.
You can leverage that too.
That's- yeah.
It's what's hot at the moment, and then it's gone.
Right.
You know, like you can leverage that from a marketing standpoint to make people come in that week. It might be an otherwise slow week, but like, hey, the ramps just got here.
Yeah.
You know, I laughed when you said it because of all the things, ramps are the things people literally lose their minds over. And
they're
ask you
they're
for
okay.
I always say they're one of my favorite things, and it's hard to quantify things like that.
Yeah, wow.
But the customer obviously really loves them. You know, so if you're not explaining to them how ramps work and that we can only get this time of the year and we're only going to have them for 3 or 4 weeks, you have to come and get them now. And the other thing when that happens, you kind of have to go all in on something.
You do.
You
Yeah.
know, because again, like, you can't order 5 pounds of ramps for a couple days, and you know, like, these people don't want to bring you 5 pounds of ramps. They're going to go out foraging. They're going to have 75 pounds or 100 pounds. So it's like, okay, how many creative ways can we use ramps right now?
Right.
You said strawberries before. It's the same thing with strawberries. We get strawberries from Rare Earth Farm, who Drew used to work for. Who honestly, I think you working for them kind of changed how they approach restaurants. They weren't really doing restaurants.
Yeah, they found it
Now
to be
they're looking
they found it to be a rather like cumbersome and not a very not a good money making operation
Yeah.
for them at that
Well, everybody's
juncture.
switching on price. I've never once.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Again, I mean, not that that's a hard and fast rule. I don't think I've ever once sweated one of my farmers or local people, or even most of my purveyors, about price on things.
Same for you, Dan?
Yeah, it's, if there's something like we're negotiating, we also only use Wisconsin cheese, so we'll shop around on cheese, because there's a variety. And
There's
it's-
a lot
and
to
it's a
shop
year-round-
around.
Yeah, but when you're, especially when you're talking about, if you're talking to a forager, you know, it is what it is, and it's really
Yeah,
about
you
quality.
kinda
If you
just
bring me-
strike when
If you
it's
bring
gone.
me something that's got spores and is moldy and I can't use it, that's one thing, but if you're bringing me a good quality product, we're gonna pay the price you're asking for.
Because you just spent an entire day or 2 days on the sides of hills,
Yes.
not stopping for lunch, and you,
Poison oak out there.
right. Well, and those were the days you could do it, because those were the days that the morels, the ramps, the what have you were up. So this is a question specifically for Drew and then for the two restaurateurs. Is one strategy to go deep with a farmer on something that you use all the time, like you've done with eggs, like maybe you've done with lettuces, if you're developing a relationship like this for your restaurant? So you keep ordering from the US Foods and the Cisco's or your other resources, but you say, I know that I need a lot of beef, so you're my beef farmer. I know I need a lot of greens, so and then build that, or the way that you did with eggs. Is that a good strategy, or are you?
Oh yeah, that's a tremendous strategy. It really is. I mean, because it keeps the farmer in constant income, and honestly, whenever you put something in the ground, you want to know that it's going to have a home, right? Like, you don't really
It's a
want
lot
to
of
do
work for
it. It
just
really
sitting
is, and that's why CSA models always seem so attractive too, because you have a captive audience, so to speak. You know where all this food is going to go. Right. Now there's a little bit more unknown when you start getting out of that, but then the onus on you is again quality. They're not going to say no to it if it's a superior product. But definitely, like greens, we can grow like crazy in Wisconsin, and that's a very good market for us, because he knows that he's going to go through them like crazy. I know that I can produce them at a good, fair price, competitive with everybody, without putting my whole farm into kale and chard and chicory. Which is fun as that sounds. Yeah, right.
Be pretty at least.
Oh,
yeah.
it'd look
be
great.
beautiful. So from a
But all these
restaurant,
conversations start,
Yeah.
this time of year, and leading up to that.
and well, from the restaurant side though, are you putting all your eggs literally and figuratively, in your case, in one place, and then that can slide backwards too? such and such, the fellow breaks his back or something like that, and then you're out of eggs, and you still have people turning up for brunch that need 6,000 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a question. So do you ever have times where they don't have enough eggs? Or early on, did you have times where?
There have been a couple of occasions where we've had to, and on the flip side, if you remember all the crises with eggs last year,
Yes, yep.
because we were working with sustainable producers, it was not an issue. We were never, and there were people coming to them, and they protected our supply too. So those relationships were better because a lot of people, even a state away, people didn't have eggs. So yes, I think you need to continually be looking for other sources. But to the point you're talking about of kind of test modeling something, just when we first got together before we started talking, we were talking about guinea hens. And they're gaining some popularity. People are starting to have some interest in them. We've had a lot of success bringing in a dozen or 2 dozen birds to Story Hill. We kind of use Story Hill as a little bit of an incubator. We'll try things out there, see how it goes. But we've had enough success with them now that we're ready to start talking to farmers about something that we could put on our menu, maybe over at Maxie's, that we know we're going to sell 20 orders of on a Friday night, and consistently that we would sell several dozen a week. So that's how it ends. And any restaurateur will lament this, and probably a lot of people in the audience, as our chefs will like to say, the best way to kill a special is to put it on the regular menu.
Yeah.
You sell it like crazy as a special. Now I put it on the menu and it dies. So you got to.
It's the book on the top shelf that you're not supposed to read when you're a kid. Well, you're going to get that book. Yeah, absolutely.
As soon as it becomes available, yeah. So there's a little bit of a give and take there, but we've had some success. And again, I think anyone who really is serious about embracing this as a restaurant operator, you have to understand that supply will not always be there. Supply will be changing regularly, and that's just how it is. You've got to be ready to reprint menus and change things up. And so that is how we did. But again, on the longer term, bigger picture stuff, like we have been able to work into a couple of these regional supply situations where, like a local company, Strauss, I give them credit for they work with multiple operations around the Midwest, raising to a particular standard and creating a high enough quality product that we can say, all right, we're going to run this field dish for the winter, and they will supply it and they'll make it happen. So I think there's a balance of the relationship with the local farmers, or we work with Foodie a little bit, and we certainly work very closely with the Tosa Farmers Market so that we can try and supply through that. But at the same time, for any kind of volume things we want to make long-term commitments to, more often than not, we're having to go out.
Well, especially here in Wisconsin, anytime you have that kind of volume, eventually that well is going to dry up, especially when you're talking about vegetables.
Sure.
It's
Look outside.
yeah. It takes serious money to grow. Prices that no one wants to pay to grow in this kind of weather.
So what are the back office pluses and minuses? I mean, I just think about our business, and so to keep track of all sorts of invoices and people that you're working with versus the person that can deliver your lettuce, your beef, and your toilet paper all on one invoice. I mean, that's the simplicity of and I'm not trying to throw anyone under the foodie bus here, but that's one aspect to the food business. And then there's the 17 farmers or the 12 or the whoever that, it ebbs and flows, and one week it's $140 and the next week it's $1,200. What is that experience like from a business standpoint?
I won't lie, it's definitely more complicated. We use a lot of different purveyors at Pizza Man because they might just have this one thing that is local, it might be the only thing they have or the only thing they make, and that might be what we want. And kind of like what Joe said, quality at the end of the day is what makes decisions for us.
You thinking of the little old lady that you buy the syrup from
Yeah.
in Door County?
That, part of it's the cost of the syrup, it's more, but But if you get her on the phone, like, you're not going anywhere for a while. Like, she's gonna tell you all of her stories about how her daughter went to school in Milwaukee. It's the same story every time, but the serve is amazing. I mean, that kind of goes to the relationship side of it. But, in back office speak, I don't think in terms of having one company bring you everything or multiple companies. It can be a little bit more complicated when you're doing the ordering and receiving because it's not all showing up at the same time, or it's not just one email or phone call. And there's obviously 10 or 12 invoices to process instead of 1 or 2. I don't think that's that big of a deal. It's kind of monotonous, easy work. What I think a lot of people do, and it's not just restaurants that want to use farm vegetables and whatnot like that, but a lot of restaurants don't do due diligence and cost their menus out. Like, I've always been shocked at the restaurants I've worked at over the years that you walk into and they don't have anything anywhere in the restaurant that tells them how much their best-selling entree actually costs them. And my mentor was kind of a food cost genius, I always say. Like Juan at Ristorante, everybody lauds Juan for his pasta and the local ravioli. I was saying, he's a food cost genius. Like, a lot of what I know, I learned from him on that. And I think having the skills and being able to say, like, okay, I have this thing coming in, it's gonna cost me this much, how can I make money selling it? Because it might not be a salad, it might have to go into an entree, because you can charge a little bit more. It's all about the margin, right? Not just the percentage. I also kind of cheat a little bit at Pizza Man because we have this thing called pizza. And, if Drew calls me, he's like, hey, I have a lot of Friarello peppers, these like little tiny, like green Italian peppers. It's like, can you use them? It's like, oh yeah. Like, it's like, well, how are you gonna go through that? It's like, I'm gonna run a pizza special with it. It's like, why? Because it's gonna sell. It's pizza. All I gotta do is put something on a pizza, and I can basically be guaranteed to go through a pretty large volume with that. Sometimes we'll even name, like we had a Love Rock Farm pizza that, kind of rotated. It wasn't really set what was on it, so I was kind of concerned that it might not sell because it wasn't even like, oh, lettuces and this. It was like literally like whatever we had to do. But it sold really well, I think, because people were into supporting the farm. But, if you're not costing out your menu, if you're not costing out your ingredients, if you don't know how much an ounce of olive oil costs you, if you don't know how much a Caesar salad costs to make, you're going to be behind the gun, because trying to, working with farmers and stuff like that at a higher price, that's kind of like advanced food costs at that point. You have to have your basis down and know what you're spending on things to pull it off.
So how do you innovate then? Because you don't, it sounds scary to me, and I think that's why a lot of folks are here, is they're trying to get over the hump of how to do this. So you don't exactly know what's coming. You have a sort of a sense. You have a general sense of how much it'll cost. You want to innovate in your restaurants, but you also want to make money. And then if you could all speak to the other component that I think is really key, is that you have to have servers that can communicate and storytell. Otherwise, don't do it, right? Is that that would be true? Yeah. But anyway, so how do you get around that curve of I sort of know what's going to happen and what my expenses will be next month, but I don't really know.
I don't know. Like I think if you're a restaurant and you do things the right way, like, things can work out. Like, if you're a well-run establishment, you can probably take this on. If you're consistently making a profit, you could probably absorb something like this easier than you think, I think, and still be profitable. Now, you might lose a little. You have to kind of ask yourself, like, what's an acceptable profit margin? I probably run a higher cost percentage in terms of cost of goods on pizza than other pizza restaurants, because rather than take, a lower food cost like most pizza restaurants do, I take those 5 or 6 points that I would be at, and I reinvest that in other areas in that restaurant. So I can buy only Wisconsin cheese, so I can get grass-fed beef, so I can buy really awesome olive oil, so I can buy farmer vegetables. But, when I'm looking at the categories of what I spend money on, it's all broken out by different food categories. Fresh produce is its own category. That number is always higher in the summer when I'm buying stuff from the farmers. And I think a lot of people on service would be like, well, it's because you're spending more on your lettuce than you should be. You should be getting it from Aki or Cisco or something like that. And actually what it is, it's just like, no, in the summer, when the vegetables are what's around, that's what we're going to make. So I'm not selling a beef special. I'm selling zucchini blossoms.
Right.
You know.
Right. Right.
Well, you've often talked about building your dish backwards. Everybody always starts with their cut of meat, right? And then they decide what they're going to put along with it. Whereas we can more or less tell you I have these vegetables. You say, well, this is going to go great with it. And so even if you do, you've said where even if you do have an item, a piece of produce that is a tick on the expensive side, you can make up for that by being able to play with what you're serving on the other side of it, and bounce those points back and forth.
Not the cut of meat it's serving.
Yeah.
I'm not going to serve it with fillet. I might get like a sirloin or braise something
Yeah.
at a lower cost. It's not about buying a lower quality. It's just buying a smarter cut or a different ingredient to pair it with to kind of offset that. Definitely not in the realm of local food, but white truffles. You don't put white truffles on lobster. You put white truffles on literally cornmeal porridge, polenta.
Yeah, or like risotto or something.
Why
Like,
is that? You've already spent all the money on the truffles. You don't really have any more money to spend. It's the same idea. Like, how do you take this ingredient that's more expensive and pair it with other things so you can still be profitable and make your money on it?
Do you back engineer, you and Joe, and
Well,
is that
I mean,
how you do
this
it?
is one of the things that Joe Mensch is so good at. I mean, he is just incredibly skilled at whole utilization.
Yeah.
And there is this you referenced it a little bit, the concept of percentage versus margin. You may run a 35-40% food cost on something when your goal typically may be 32%, but you can justify it because the margin, you're selling it for $14 instead of $12. And in the end, we all take dollars to the bank, not percentages.
Yeah.
It's important to look at things in terms of percent.
That's one of the most important things you need to know.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, you've got to be able to justify to your guest, hey, it's worth the extra dollars you're paying here. Again, it goes back to telling the story. It goes back to not allowing subpar product through your door. So you're going to do it when the product's right, when it's great, and you can embrace it and say, this is great quality stuff, and we're proud to have it. And then you tell the story a little bit where it comes from. The other part, just as a technique that I know Joe has used, so we buy whole lambs a lot. We'll buy a side of beef sometimes, we'll buy whole pigs sometimes, but very regularly we just got a good relationship and we'll buy whole lamb. He'll price the dish, not, when you're buying a whole lamb, you'll typically pay a per pound price that seems quite low. But what he'll do is work out the yield and then compare it against what that cut would be, maybe on a leg of lamb or lamb rack. Lamb rack is the kind of the extreme, but let's say price it based on the leg of lamb cost and apply that to every bit of it. So when you're working with shoulder or some lesser cuts, you still are charging a little higher price to kind of get it back. You're going to lose money on the rack. Okay,
Yeah.
You're not going to get the money you need for it, but because you're doing whole animal work here, you're going to make it on other cuts.
Aggregate it off, yeah.
yeah.
Now, that's an interesting way. I actually sometimes do something similar to that, but a little bit backwards. When I was at Lake Park, one of the chefs I worked with, Todd, who we're friends with, had a beef ranch. We really wanted to bring in a Murray Gray steer. And I had done this with Juan at Restaurante before, where we brought in a whole cow, and it's like this overwhelming amount of meat. I mean, a whole cattle is a lot.
Well, it's not a big kitchen at Restaurante either. It's like, that's 2/3 of the kitchen, the cow.
That's the whole.
Yeah.
That's a couple stations.
And one of the things with something like beef, and you could probably do the same thing with lamb with a rack or something like that. Like, my goal was, there's the steaks, right? The things everybody knows. Everybody knows New York strip. Everybody knows filet. Everybody knows ribeye. Basically, my theory is that if I can make all the money back on the cost of the cow, selling those plates of the things that everybody wants, and at that point I've paid for the cow, then all the grind, all the chuck, all the other parts that I can make stews, and beef bourguignon, and tartare,
Right.
and all these other things, all that, Juan would call it pure oxygen. Like pure oxygen. At that point, then it's like, if I price it to make all my money back on the sirloin or on the strip steak, then essentially the cost for the chuck on that plate to me might be zero. I've already made my money on it. So at this point, now I'm just making really great margin on these dishes where I was breaking even on those.
So do you need, if any of you are considering making this leap or moving further into it, do you need well, let me preface this. Joe, who isn't here, said something that never forgotten. He said an owner or a chef owner walk through a restaurant and see everything differently than just a cook or someone who works there. Every item of food is profit that could turn into profit or could be waste. He said, you get the end, was Joe's quote, you get the end of a loaf of a bread. And instead of throwing that out, he said, Dan or I will get some peanut butter and put it on it and eat it, even if we're not hungry, because we don't want to waste that opportunity. Yeah. We need calories to live, and we can't, that's our money down the drain. Do you need a chef owner, do you need a restaurateur owner versus just having a restaurateur and then some cooks and so on and so forth to really embrace this style of farm to table in a real financial model?
I think you have an opportunity, if you are the chef proprietor or just chef, to challenge the people underneath you to impress you, because it's an engineering challenge, it's a creative challenge to see all the things that you can make from if you're talking about whole animal or even whole vegetable. I mean, I remember, and this goes back a long time, but I remember getting just nailed by a chef when I was a young culinary apprentice for throwing away celery leaves. He's like, "What are you doing?" Those can be used. Those are beautiful garnish. They have flavor elements to them. There's a lot of things we can do with celery leaves, and I think that approach needs to be taken. I mean, I think if there's a takeaway here, none of this happens without considerable effort in trying to develop relationships.
Diligence on both sides of it.
Yeah,
right?
But at the end of the day, first and foremost, you serve better food, and hopefully that will distinguish you from your competitors, and people will love you more, which is really why people make food in the first place, is to receive love. Then
It's true. It's totally true. The first thing we do out of the womb is eat. I'm sorry, people. I mean,
But there's absolutely a way to make a profit at this, but it does not come without considerable effort. And I think if you're running a kitchen, you need to be pushing the people underneath you to be thinking in terms of what else can you do, what's the next thing you can think of. And you were mentioning before about having to think up things on the fly. I would also argue that part of this is going and talking to farmers about, all right, I know you're growing kale. When will you have kale, you think? It's not a given, but when do you think you'll have kale? And begin thinking about recipes that you can utilize kale. And any number of different ingredients out there, and begin and challenging the people who work for you to say, these are things we're going to need you, and yes, maybe I'll let you go buy a head of kale to try something out, and when the mother load comes in, then we'll be ready to play. So, I mean, I think it's an effort of pre-planning even now for things that you won't see till July.
In a weird way, I think this is where you start to talk about cooking fundamentals and the idea of what's old is new again. In a bygone era, wasting food was, a cardinal sin.
Right.
Before things showed up perfectly cut and cryovac in cases from a broadliner at your back door where you don't have to do anything other than open up a bag and dump it in a pan. I think when you're the kind of chef or where you're trying to train people to think like this, when you're looking at the tops that come on carrots and you're asking yourself, what can I do with this other than just chop them off and throw them away? That you're really...
You're not in the game, really.
Like whole vegetable. No, exactly. I mean, when I was at Restaurante and we started buying, there was like a cooperative at that point called Homegrown Wisconsin, which I think folded and maybe came back as a different name. But Jen Air was in it, and we were buying stuff from Jen Air. And Kay Jensen came and she was telling me about all the restaurants she would walk into, watching them cut the ends off their char, the stems, and throw the stems away. and it's just like, in a weird way, I want to ask people, it's like, did you ever think to just try it? Like, maybe just eat it? It's weird. Again, most of the stuff probably isn't going to kill you. I think, don't eat the leaves off rhubarb. That's the one thing I know. But, I think this idea of convenience that's been bred in our culture and society the last 30, 40 years of mechanized food and canning and all this stuff has made us kind of really lazy as cooks and chefs, and everything needs to be easy now. And it's not always easy, but it can be really rewarding and really gratifying to kind of look at something that would be waste or would be thrown away somewhere else and make something really awesome out of it. You know, the term gourmet is always misused in this country. I think in the 90s at some point, to be gourmet just meant you had roasted bell peppers and balsamic on your menu. And everything was gourmet. Oh, you're a gourmet chef. And I hope I'm right because I know she's going to know if I'm wrong. I think to be gourmet is to make a lot out of little or something out of nothing.
Yeah.
Is the technical term.
That's really well. Yep.
Strange enough, I learned that in home ec in high school.
Which we're bringing back, hopefully, everybody.
And I think people need to start to think like that again. You know, like how do you not waste these things? How do you, because trust me, if you can make money selling carrot tops, that's going to be a good food cost because they don't really cost you anything. It's just smart business.
They come free on the carrot.
Yeah.
I don't want to.
We feed them to the animals.
Well,
You know?
but they're still
But they're still,
But
no, they're
still
still
being
in
used.
use.
Yeah, right.
You know,
That's the
it's-
good news.
Not
you know.
supposed to waste it in these kinds of industries if you're doing it right.
So we've got about 10 minutes before we hit 1 o'clock, and I know you have other seminars and other things to do, though we are probably the most engaging, charming people you'll meet today, and you want to stay here for hours. But,
Everybody loves farmers.
yeah, exactly. I want to open it up to questions, and then so that you have time to get on to wherever else you'd like to go. Don't be shy, and you can direct them at any one or all of us. Yes, sir.
I have a question for Drew.
Yes, sir.
Farmer, have you ever considered doing a futures contract with restaurateurs to sort of guarantee to them a certain price for a hill lettuce?
You know, you hate to get ahead of yourself just because you know, as far as a contract like that, just because it is such a moving target and, you know, the conditions can change in a heartbeat. There are some things that you probably would be willing to do it on, but as far as you know, a more specialty crop, I would be hesitant to do that. Did you have an example that you were thinking of? And
No, you were talking about lettuce, you know.
Yeah.
That seems like it's a low-cost item. You know, if you could, I understand weather is a factor, but if you could sort of guarantee, well, if you buy X number of heads of lettuce from me, I'll guarantee you this price, and maybe within a certain parameter that, you know, if it's a rough growing season, you know, I
Yes,
might have
yeah.
to adjust my price X percentage or something, you know, I mean, just again, as a way for the chefs and the restaurateurs to sort of know what's, you know.
yeah, absolutely. Something like that, I think, would be an effective tool. You know, and like I said before, it's always really nice to know that the food has a home. You know, as much of it as you can. That gives us a good amount of comfort.
I mean, the three big examples where that's worked is, of course, Organic Valley. They said we'll pay this much per pound of milk if you grow it under these standards, and you're always secure at getting this much. And they, you know, they were at risk as a cooperative in the early years, but committed to it, and that's turned out really well. And then our friend Todd's Beef Enterprise, which was something like that within Premier Beef, and we'll pay this much. And then no one talks about it, but the little button mushroom people, you know, they work that way. But I mean, you're growing mushrooms in the dark in a Kwanzaa hut somewhere. So
Yeah.
short of a tornado, you're pretty, you know,
We
you're pretty
actually-
safe.
We have a relationship with a greenhouse operation that grows sunflower sprouts for us, and we worked with them for a little while, and one of the conversations was about price. You know, we were struggling with it a little bit, and she came back and said, if you will pay me on a quarterly basis, and I will hit this. So that's a relationship that we do have. Again, it's a greenhouse environment, it's a lot more controlled, she knows how much she can generally grow, but we've been buying, you know, that way from her now for 2 years, probably. So it can work, but especially when you're talking about outdoor growing, that's a tough situation.
I mean, you get some hail and your lettuce is gone.
Yeah.
Which isn't totally uncommon in the early going.
What we know for
situation,
sure
you know.
is if you give a farmer some money, he's already spent it. He's already spent it on improvements to his farm or whatever. It's not like they're going to be able to say, oh, no problem, I got that cash in the bank. It's gone.
You definitely, you definitely got to take the long-term view. It's, you know, this few $1,000s, you know, you got to look at it. It's like, okay, it's like this is a big chunk this season. It'll be, you know, less next season. Hopefully, by the season thereafter, you know, your tractor is paid for, even though it's from 1956.
Right.
You know.
Another question out there? No? No question. Yes?
How do you find the right farmer? I mean, do you just knock on somebody's door or drive around looking for the little?
Can everyone hear that question? How do you find the right farmer, source them out there?
Well, I mean,
You grow
my
up with,
scenario-
yeah,
my
right.
scenario's probably-
Hand-me-downs of clothes, clearly.
But before I bought from Drew, I mean, I've been telling your story. Why don't you talk about Rare Earth and how you got involved with it?
Well, they run a CSA program, and I started up there as a work share, and then a part-time guy, and then a full-time guy, and it kind of helped facilitate some of these conversations that they had. I'd worked in restaurants, been working on their farm, so I kind of had a foot in.
Steve was kind of interested in, like, how do I talk to, because he was frustrated because he never had any.
Well, and it was exactly the things that you were talking about before. It's like, all right, it's like, I know I can produce it. I know I can do it. Am I going to be able to take several hours out of my day and be gone, losing productivity and daylight, on the farm, on a schedule, bringing it down to the restaurants, but, with, and again, it's that constant line of communication, between the Zach and the farmers and the expectations and the prices and the deliveries and kind of making sure all that lines up, and and it can be profitable for both.
I mean, if you don't have a farmer in your family to kind of to hook you up, I would probably just start at the markets.
And
Go around
honestly,
and talk. Again, it's a relationship. It's like anything else. Like the companies that we buy stuff from at Pizza Man, especially with the food. I mean, I've been working with some of these people for a decade plus. I know their family. I know their kids. Their son who's going to take over the business for them someday. So if you go to a market and just start asking around, I think that would be the best way. Or, I mean, sometimes they just walk in with a card, like kind of being open to that. Like I tend to not love people just showing up unannounced because we're busy people.
I don't want to
but-
get shot or anything either.
no,
Yeah, but if you're a farmer, with
not all
something
farmers
cool,
are crazy
like,
gunmen.
how did you get set up with the egg people?
That originally came through Nesvig. Because we were challenging them to help us find them, and they did.
Yeah.
But I would say, as I said, I think we work right now with about a dozen farmers. I would say most of those came from just going to the farmer's market, which, again, is a great way to acquire some produce, test some things out, and see how it goes. If you like what they're selling, you can start to talk about it.
Where is do you have a restaurant, or you're thinking of a restaurant?
Down south Wisconsin and Flowers Lake.
Okay. I mean, there's the other resource is the Fresh Farm Atlas, which is published for regions, but it's where we get a lot of stuff. And the farmers that are listed in there, it's a great publication, basically say, we're looking to sell to CSAs. You can pull up and pick out one of our turkeys for Thanksgiving. We're open to restaurants. So, and they list oftentimes their top 8 things that they produce. So, you can really
Fresh Farm Atlas.
Fresh Farm Atlas, yeah.
And as a farmer, like, you'll always accept a cold call.
Yeah.
You really will, because even if you can't help them out that month or even that season, this is something that you can cultivate and come back around to.
There was just a Fresh Farm Atlas delivered across the room. That was awesome. You should ask for $1 million now, because you'll walk out in the hallway and there'll be a pile of money waiting for you.
We don't have answers on that.
One more question. We've got time, because I want to. The show wants me to keep on schedule, and I'm in charge of that. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if there are specific products that you would like more of, or some
Okra.
Okra.
You got okra, we want it. Literally, we will take 10,000 pounds of okra if you've got it. Because we want to pickle it and have it year-round. And unfortunately, I only know about what I've heard from farmers is that there is a mold susceptible in this part of the country that makes it hard to grow. But man, would we love to
Typically
buy
a
more
little
okra.
warmer average.
Yeah, it is. Southern Illinois produces a fair bit of okra, and we have been bringing it in from there so that we can pickle it. But for Maxie's, we would love as much okra as we can get our hands on.
It came from West Africa, just in the history.
Yes.
So
Yes.
think Congo, that kind of area. That's prime okra
Guineas are
growing.
also
And
African.
look outside.
And then look outside, yeah. So we're not an okra sympathetic climate, yeah. We're in zone 5, and that's like 3 zones above
Yeah.
the happy place. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you. I hope this is informative. Personally, because of the work that I do with Wisconsin Foodie and other things, I hope you're moving in the direction of legitimate farm to table. Yeah, it's not easy, but I think it's very rewarding. Yeah. Thank you.